That's a banger, that one.
Thank you.
It's quite light on the bangers, though. So You know, it's interesting when you introduce people that you really love and admire, and the love goes deeper than just the craft. It becomes something that you consider to be familial, that will last in and out of music. Doesn't really matter. I'll always love you, man. It's easy just to slide in where we left off. And I think for the sake of listeners and viewers, I would like to do something that feels just a little more contained and a little more official, which is a little out of character for our friendship. But I think it's important for people to know why you're here. This isn't just a couple of guys drinking tea and talking. We'll get to that. But at least let's start with some official capacity, which is that my guest today on the podcast and in the room on video is one of the biggest music fans of my life, and someone who has turned that love and appreciation of music and art into really into service of music, creating an outlet for artists to create their best work. Facts, absolute facts. Learning to speak the language in such a way that artists don't feel pressured or feel introduced to the edgier sides of that framework, pure freedom to create, and has created an incredibly successful model that others have lovingly copy and pasted ever since. Now, beyond that comes the artistic side, which has always been there, but resurrected and given life in recent years through this idea of everything is recorded in this beautiful production work with other artists as well, which we'll talk about again throughout the interview, but incredible artists. Ultimately, it all wraps up into a life in music. Writer, producer, business owner, founder, music fan, Richard Russell. It's good to see you.
What a beautiful introduction. Very happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
We're here with another Everything is Recorded album, Temporary. Very true. We are only here for a brief period of time in the hope that we leave some kind of influence or inspiration for those to carry through to make their lives better, not to make our legacy bigger. But the one thing that is not temporary is music. As long as we are living and breathing, this thing will exist and to be around. How do you find the balance of the statement of mortality versus the permanence of art? How about that for an opening salvo?
Oh, that's a good question. There is a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind by a guy called Shunryu Suzuki, which I believe was the introduction of Zen philosophy to the West. This was like the first book this is what I believe is true. This was the first book about Zen philosophy that became big in the West. I think he came to LA. And this book, so I have every page of it pasted in the studio bathroom.
Every page?
Every page. So
Deconstructed,
I've made
wallpaper out of it. Amazing.
Yeah. I produced a song on Peter Gabriel's new album. That's called 4 Kinds of Horses. 4 Kinds of Horses was something Peter read in the toilet. And then really wrote a whole song like running with that. One of the many mind-blowing things that is said in this book is, if it's not paradoxical, it isn't true. So everything important has got these two sides to it. This album being called Temporary refers to the fact that this is temporary, we are temporary, and that's obviously, it gets a little easier to see that the older you get. It's one of the many benefits of getting a bit older. You get to see, okay, this is really like, this is all drawing to a close at some point.
Yeah.
Anytime.
Yeah.
Any moment,
Yeah.
anytime, however long. But then there's things that are permanent. And here's the paradox. So what I was finding leading into making this record is I was having many conversations with people where this theme just seemed to be very present, which was that there is something permanent. And then what is that? Well, you could call it spirit. Spirit, I think, is probably the simplest way of doing it. And so, when David Bowie passes away, everyone's distraught because it turns out he's temporary. But we shouldn't be too surprised by that. And we know that what he's done is permanent, and the influence of it and the love and the inspiration is there forever.
It's a unique grief, that. Not to create a hierarchy around grief, because it's different for everybody and there's different intensities. But that the loss of people that mean so much to us that we know so little personally about in terms of relatability is a unique place for grief to exist. I've felt it very deeply over the loss of people I never met. And I've always wondered what really that is about. I've tried to kind of understand that a little bit better. Is it something as trade-worthy as I just don't get any more music from that person anymore? Okay, wrap that into it. But it's deeper than that. The feeling is deeper than that. And I've landed on gratitude. I think the grief comes from a place of gratitude, like, oh man, thank you for everything that you gave me and the times you were there for me. It's like the loss of something that gave me so much strength when others around me were not capable.
Yeah, and I mean, if you look at someone like Bowie and, the many, many unbelievable musicians and artists who've passed, what they gave to us is so immense, and we all get so much from it that, yeah, you do want people to just feel pure gratitude. I mean, I understand that the reason why people feel so much for the passing of a person they've never met is because the essence of fandom and of love for music and artists is you feel you
it's
know
a closeness.
that you feel you know that
it's a
person.
closeness for sure.
You feel you know that artist, and you do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you do.
You do, because
they've revealed themselves to you.
Yeah, and like the people who are worth hearing, there's naked honesty there. So you are seeing them. You're not seeing a pretend version. And obviously there's other ways of doing this. There's other ways of being an artist and a musician, which is more to do with artifice, which can also be totally valid, and the creation of characters and the telling of stories in that way. But even when people are doing that, you are getting them, and the better that an artist is, the more you're seeing of them. And that might even be like Liam Howlett or Burial, and they're not opening their mouths, and they don't need to. Or Jamie XX, you know that person. You can hear what they're about from what they're doing with their hands. And I guess that's a very powerful sort of deep love and reverence is for that type of artist.
Terminator X
speaks with his hands.
Only needs to speak with his hands.
Well, that's right. So I guess the idea of like, it's baffling to some people. I think to non-music fans, it's baffling. Why are these people so upset that this artist is not hearing them? It's when they didn't know them. They did know them.
Yeah, and I think the more that you feel like you know them is because they speak to you so deeply, they create such a bond that when someone passes away, where the sadness sits outside the gratitude is, I'm like, oh man, you couldn't get through. Because a lot of times it's through self-destruction of some description in the arts. It can get bad, and sometimes it's just a terrible accident, but sometimes it's not. And I always think like, oh man, you gave me so much, and you couldn't get there. And it just,
But that wasn't the case with Bowie.
No.
So he lived a life, and where he was like a fully actualized person who'd been through a lot and lived a full life and was ready for what happened. And so I think in that situation, it's like, well, this is, he's given us all this work. The work continues. And obviously, when you look at the life, a truncated life, right? A life which is, an Amy Winehouse situation, that's terrible and tragic and heartbreaking, and completely different. It's completely different.
Every situation is completely different.
It's a completely different situation.
Yeah.
My only encounter was extremely meaningful to me. Not to him. I stress this. This meant literally nothing to him. But what happened was, the first time I went to New York, when I ended up staying there for a long time, and I was a kid, and the first day that I was there, I was staying in, it was like a flop house on like 70 something or 80 or something. It was not the place. It was not the place. And I went out walking. I walked downtown, and on the walk down, I walked for like a couple of hours there. On the walk downtown, I walked past David Bowie and a man in the street. And I also walked past Red Alert.
Amazing.
In the street.
It's the most New York thing day
Legendary
ever.
DJ. And I was like, this place is incredible.
Yeah.
Welcome to America.
Yeah.
David Bowie and Red
Yeah.
Alert.
Who else is around?
And I've just got here.
Yeah.
And I'm walking. So I think that was like all your New York's funny like that, isn't it? Because it is a place where you show up there and it's like, LA takes some getting used to.
It's all behind closed doors. New York is right there.
How'd you find LA?
It's all right there.
New York's right there.
It's right there.
On the street.
And London's like that, but it's too big. London's too spread out. New York just feels so centralized.
Yeah. So I think you get to New York.
It happened to me too. I saw Dean Wareham from Luna, who I was a huge fan of, and he just came out of like a store on Broadway. Broadway is like where you shop when you're young and cheap and you've got nothing, it's Broadway's not, it's okay. He was coming out of like a jean store on Broadway and I was like half stoked, half crushed that Dean Wareham was buying his Levi's in some kind of knockoff jean store.
But it's like America as, you grow up in the UK as a music fan. America is a central part of your fantasy, really, of what music is, and of where a lot of it comes from. And
oh yeah, you're drawn in. There's a gravitational pull at some point in your life to see if it's all as real as it was in your bedroom or in your headphones.
Yeah, and then you get there, and you pick up on this drive.
And yet you have been so enormously successful and remained incredibly ensconced in your community within the UK and the UK music that you've invested in. I mean, Exile was built on UK music. I mean, it was only further down the line you started to experiment with international artists and it started to broaden. It came from success, but it felt like a UK identity.
That's not exactly true. That's not exactly true because in the very early days.
The licensing days?
Yeah.
Ah, yeah, okay.
So there were there was a lot of, it was another community actually of like the small dance labels in the UK and the small dance labels in the US, mostly in New York, all those incredible outfits like a New Groove, for instance, Fourth Floor, Nervous, Strictly Rhythm, all these amazing labels. Tommy Boy, right? Those small labels where they were all run by hustlers, but there was some great taste in there somewhere because they were putting out unbelievable tunes, one after the other. And
it was a guaranteed purchase in Auckland if it had a Nervous Records logo on it.
Amazing.
Just buy it.
Amazing. And they wanted people to put those records out in other places. So we got into that.
But for all intents and purposes, my point, you're right, but also I kind of feel like I'm on the right path. I feel like when XL developed its identity as an incubation space for artists to find their voice, and the XL logo was on it, it was very much about what the UK was saying at that time.
Yeah, the scene, the rave scene, the dance scene in the UK, very like powerful moment in time, right? Late 80s, going into the early 90s. America's in the mix because, as always in the UK, there's this tremendous appreciation for American music. So this is like goes back to like jazz artists and blues artists coming over to the UK and being, people know me.
Yeah.
They know my material.
Yeah.
And I'm like, welcome here. And I'm maybe playing, maybe I'm playing to bigger audiences, in Liverpool.
Yeah.
Than I am at home. So that's always been going. And then, when you had that like early formative days of house music, Chicago and Detroit, these records are in the pop charts in the UK. This is nowhere near the mainstream in America.
Yeah, man. Inner City was like, that's credible. But in New Zealand, that was like top 5 on the charts.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah, so there's this like, there's always this, and that was maybe music that didn't quite fit the commercial expectations in the US at that time. And the US has those commercial expectations always. So I think there's always been an artist who's got like, for an artist who wants to go outside of that, go back to Jimi Hendrix, go forward to Tyler, right? Someone who maybe doesn't like, maybe the most brilliant of artists, the most game-changing of artists. It might actually, at the very start, it might be difficult for the US to really embrace it. And then you turn up in the UK, maybe even in France, you turn up in these places and people, they want that. They want the the newness and the innovation of it.
Because the psychology of pirate radio, whether it exists or doesn't, still the psychology will never die. And whereas out here in America, right, it's just commerce. The drive leads to commerce, and so ain't nobody supporting Tyler because it ain't going to bring any money in yet. And yet, what he does is his ambition and his drive meets his talent, meets an audience, and boom. And I'm glad you said that. Maybe the most exciting, because Eddie on my team said this morning on the live show, are we at a point now where after this album we can just kind of declare Tyler the most important of his generation? Because he produces everything, writes everything, his vision. And that's not to create a hierarchy around the other goats, but Tyler is a complete 360 service industry for himself. Like, he does it all, with little exception.
But that's the spirit. That's the spirit, the DIY spirit that, and you can take that anywhere, and you can take that to the biggest level. But what he was doing from day one, I suppose who knew? I mean, every artist has got a different day one, of course, but you don't really get to see day one.
You don't get to see the real
You get your day one.
Although they were pretty much on tape from day one. I mean, they were like, even if it wasn't through music, they were putting those videos up on YouTube. It's like the architecture was established very early on, and it's clear now looking back on it that Tyler was one of the heads that understood the potential of what this could become very quickly. And what I love is you go back to those early records, which some people who weren't fans considered to just be brash and at times unlistenable, and he's still playing he's still striving for the Stevie chords. He's still striving for the chords that he now knows how to play and understands, and has musicality like at a deep level on his music. He just didn't had the tools to know how to get there early on, but the ambition was very much declared early on.
I DJ'd it. Me and Jamie DJ'd it at the first show he did in London. Tiny show in London.
Odd Future or Tyler?
No, I think the very first thing was it just Tyler? Was it Odd Future? Because there were quickly some other shows after that. But that first trip he did over.
Yeah.
And, someone with that specialness. Yeah. It's like, there they are. And there's a small audience there. I mean, there's a capacity audience there. It's just a very, very small room.
It's sold out. Right. Let's be very clear.
And then the growth of that audience is, in a way, it's like, obviously it's important, but in another way it's not. It's like, it's ephemeral. It's like that artist, that spirit, that uniqueness, that's there. They're going to develop it, and it's going to and they're going to cultivate it. And the audience is going to go, like this to this massive, worldwide kind of thing. And that actually comes with its challenges. It's what everyone wants.
Do they?
But it comes...
Bit of both. Again, the paradox.
Comes with its challenges. But that spirit that's there in the first place, that's it. That's what it's all about. And then you see, it's beautiful when you see someone then ascend to these incredible heights of influence. And
it's just a day by day thing. This has been great. We're off to the races. We've covered a lot of really interesting ground, and now we get to we're all warmed up, and your tea and my hot lemon water is kicking in, and I feel like we can now start to really immerse ourselves in this new everything is recorded experience, and that's what it is. I'm always a little bit nervous about taking things out of their actual literal sort of framework of it's not an album, it's an experience. But it's both. I mean, when I put this record, when I heard it the other night and when I put it on subsequently since, it demands nothing of me, and yet I'm willing to give everything of myself to it. It's a really lovely feeling to just willingly want to listen all the way through and not feel like it's trying to hold my attention. Really well done. Beautiful record. Really beautiful. We're going to catch up to it very fast, but I've never asked you this on the record. The moment you knew that you wanted to make music with some of the time, if not most of the time, you had left on this planet, that you had given enough to the other side and you'd achieved enough. Great people do this all the time. I kind of done that, and I'll keep being a part of that, but I don't have to just be that. I've got another calling here. Do you remember exactly where you were when that decision was either made for you or you made it for yourself?
I think it had a lot to do with technology. Actually. And it had a lot to do with Liam.
Mm-hmm. Howlett,
yeah.
From The Prodigy.
Yeah.
people.
And because Liam, here's an interesting thing, was like, so when we started out, I'm a DJ, I'm making rave tunes, and we've got the label. 3 things.
Yeah. Kicks like a mule.
Kicks like a mule. And everyone's doing those 3 things. That's the culture that we were part of at that time. Rave labels owned and operated by artists, producer, DJs.
Yeah.
That's what everyone did. Never used to use the word artist. Would have seemed quite pretentious. It would have been like, oh, what, have you got a paintbrush? and a small beard, a beret.
Definitely with the people you were kicking around with.
No one was talking about artists. It's like you made tunes.
Yeah.
It was very matter of fact.
Yeah.
Street, DIY. We're just making this stuff. You're making stuff. I'm making. It was, communal in that way as well. We're making this stuff and we're getting it out. We're DJing with it. Is it working? Yep. And then we're getting it out. We're pressing up. We're getting it out. So no friction. Seamless, really. And you couldn't actually get it wrong.
Yeah.
Because
on to the next thing.
You make a tune, you test it. Dub plates, acetates, does that work? Yep. And we're pressing it, and then we're selling it. And there was a big scene, kind of like the world actually. See, we see virality as like a product of the internet. Things have always been going viral.
Yeah.
There's always been viruses.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
As long as there's been humans.
Yeah.
That just happens. How were there 10,000 of us in a field? How did everyone get there with no
And by the way,
we were there.
And by the way, in the same way that currency changes its value over time, how much is $1 million 20 years ago versus now? So does virality. 10,000 people in a field by flogging off acetates and dub plates of a record and doing it in a DIY fashion was like Wembley Stadium. It kind of felt like it was fun back then, the way that people used to play off each other, right? Like, let's do a rave, and then, fuzzer here. It wasn't like it is now where there's a darkness attached to like authority versus freedom. Back then, I'm sure there was, but even back then, it was just felt like, here come the coppers trying to shut down the rave. I mean, it's almost Keystone Cops.
Cat and mouse.
Little cat and mouse.
There was an element of cat and mouse to it, definitely. But I think now also you sort of, because that thread's continued of like partying in the UK and what is illegal and what is illegal, and just how much pressure there is from the authorities to not let people party in ways that are not regulated. And there's definitely elements of there's racial elements to it. There are definitely dark elements to that, which is, you're still very aware of. If it's a sports match, then it doesn't matter how many people are there and how badly they behave. That's fine. If it's a rave, then there's a completely different set of rules that seem to apply.
I loved the Kicks Like Camille in that whole era. But there's
you asked me when was the moment I decided to start making music again. I said Liam and technology. Okay,
yes.
So in that early phase, Liam was always, I think he recognised that I was going to help him with the Prodigy and get it out into the world. But I think he also recognised that part of the reason for that is because we were kind of the same in that we were doing the same
making
thing.
tunes.
Yeah, with some similar ideas. So my understanding of it was deep because it was me. And he always encouraged me to make tunes. And then as the label started taking off, and I kind of was like, I kind of got to take this seriously. This is like becoming a serious thing. Like, I would like this artist, I would like Prodigy. I'd like people to hear this everywhere. I'd like people to hear this in America. This is, that potential was always there. It was always like, and I wanted to support that. And I think the music making faded. And I think my confidence in it faded, and my confidence on the other side kind of soared. And I was like, all right, so now I'm doing this.
Boy, I can really relate to that.
Well, it's lots of great things came out of it.
Yeah, I can relate to that too.
And I was focused on building something, and it got built, and that was great. And there was a point where Liam said to me, so we're fast forwarding now a decade and a half or something into the very early 2000s. And Liam said to me, are you using Reason on a laptop and making beats? And I was like, no. I don't even really know what you're talking
That
about.
question gets a bomb. I'm sorry. I mean, you could stack that up as a logistical inquiry, but it's so much heavier than that.
Yeah.
It's a heavy question.
Yeah. And he said, I said, yeah, I don't even really know what they said. He said, you're going to love this shit. You're going to love it. Because, we'd spent like a decade plus talking about samples and
Yeah, but he's also asking you, why aren't you up to date? What are you doing?
Why are you doing this? I was doing it. So I got the laptop. Here we are. So, this is like.
You don't even have to. We know.
Yeah, but there's a relevant thing there, which is like learning, it was Apple. It was this.
Yes.
There's no denying that.
That's what I mean. I'm not.
It was this.
I can't take credit for any of it, but I'm very proud to be a part of it. Let me tell you, man, we, as a company, and this is the most company thing I'll say, but it's a beautiful statement. We create tools for the arts.
I don't entirely want to support this line of questioning, but there is no denying it that it was that piece of equipment. It was that laptop, and the Reason software.
How big of you?
Thank you. That's the least I could do. That was a game changer. And I started making these really, really, really wonky beats. That with that half competence, maybe not even half.
The fun stuff.
Yeah, it was really fun. Headphones on, laptop, your own little world.
No one has to hear it.
Your own little world.
Yeah. It's the best.
Discovering Logic. All right. So now it's literally that goes from black and white to color. That for me I just thought it was so incredible because in the first instance of my making rave tunes, Cubase on an Atari desktop.
I was Master Tracks Pro, bro. I'm all about it. Does the little block add up to another little block? Then we're good.
Akai S900 sampler. That was long. I know you can romanticize it now, and there were good things about it as well.
No.
And
no one wants floppy disks back.
And so this Logic thing, I was just like, this is incredible. This is incredible. I mean, I've seen the self-driving cars this week. It's the first time I've seen that. They're rolling around. I sat behind the wheel of my friend's car and he said it's going to drive itself. Did that this week as well.
Yeah, I just downloaded that software. I'm yet to have the courage to try it.
It was happening. It was great. It was crazy. I just sat there. I didn't do anything. I'm a terrible driver.
I know.
So I was into it.
I know.
I was into it. I was like, and I know people are like, is this stuff entirely reliable, entirely safe? I'm not entirely reliable.
I was going to say
entirely safe.
No, but I'd much rather trust that than you. That's the most personal I'll get with you in this
conversation.
conversation.
That would be sensible.
Yeah.
And when I asked the question, I was like, is this safe? My friend's like, you got 2 eyes. This thing's got 14. Just relax.
Who said that, Geiger?
Geiger.
Amazing.
Mark Geiger, my futurist friend, who pointed out the internet to me at the end of the 80s. So, yeah.
Yeah, Mark's ahead of the curve.
So, yeah, I've seen that this week, and that's obviously huge. My mum said to me, when her parents came over from Poland, right, and came to the UK to be safe, they saw a piece of metal flying, come over on a boat. They saw a piece of metal flying around in the sky. And she was like, I know this internet stuff's interesting, right? It's not that though. Imagine. I mean, I got a touch of it with the self-driving car.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
None of this is good as Logic for me though.
It changed the game for everybody because what it did was, and again, by the way, you've been so effusive at this point. I'm going to send some of these quotes into internal PR. Well, Apple loves you, man. Thank you. It's going to go high. These comments are going to go high. It's going to be on an internal memo. It allows you to realize complete thoughts that go much deeper than your actual skill level should allow. It's a kind tool because it allows you to explore, at least for me, explore parts of my inner voice and what drives me with an artistic spirit way more than I should be capable of doing. And I'm not saying that it's AI, but I'm saying it's enough for me to be invested and I learn through it. That's what I love about it. Like, I made that and I'm surprising myself.
But it'll be as good as you use it. It's like a guitar. I mean, it's just like depends what you do with it. My Way Home by Kanye, featuring Common. Kanye actually doesn't rap on My Way Home, although it's on his record.
Mm-hmm.
Common raps on it. And that's got this big sample of Home Is Where the Hatred Is. Gil Scott-Heron. Slowed down. Sounds kind of extra eerie and sad because it was pitched down. And I heard that and I was like, I really, really would like to hear a new Gil Scott-Heron record. I refuse to believe he hasn't got stuff to say. And he never made a bad album. He made like 13 albums. There's stuff on all those albums which is, they're not all consistent all the way through, but none of them are bad. And they've all got something absolutely transcendent on them, every single one of them. And he stopped making records for a long time. And I was like, he needs to make another record. Now, at this stage, like the label is happening. And I'm like, the label's a great platform for a Gil Scott-Heron record now. That's where we've got to. Maybe that's what it's for.
You're back to square one. You're not making rave records and distributing them. You're making records, but you've got the outlet, but you're involved in it. It's beautiful.
But part of me is like, okay, but I've got it like, this is Gil Scott-Heron. So if I want to try and find Gil, approach him, suggest making a record, do I need to be just actually like the A&R guy and work out who's going to actually make that with him, musicians, producers? And I thought, as terrifying as this idea is to me, I think I should do it. I think I should try and do that. And I also thought, I'll sort of go to him and talk about this and let's see what he says. Let's see how he feels about it. And let's see what he thinks about the role I should play in it. Because the wisdom, his wisdom is very apparent in everything he's ever done. He was a prophet. He had immense wisdom and a brilliant, brilliant brain. So when I got together with him and I suggested this, he was like, okay, all right, I'll ask around a bit.
Beautiful. It's what you want to hear.
And then in our next communication, he said, yeah, apparently you're not a person who does under the table. So come on.
That's what he said.
That's what he said.
What a line.
Yeah. So that was, that was good. That's as good a recommendation as you were going to get. And then when we started doing studio sessions together and we started working in a place called Clinton, which is gone now. Clinton was on in Hell's Kitchen in New York. He sort of looked at me and he's like, so, and I was in there, I was doing it. I was trying to work out what we were doing. It was very stripped down and basic anyway at that point. I was just trying to record him and piano really at that point. And he said to me, so is this what you're doing now? And I felt like he was sort of putting me on the line. I was thinking, it is what I want to do now. I said, yeah. And he said, good. We need people like you in places like this. I think also, if you look back historically to his incredible, incredible first three records, that run of the first three records is often for, you can't, as an artist, you can't ever go back to that. You can go other places, but there's something going on there in those first three records. They were on this label, Flying Dutchman. The guy who owned that was called, I don't know how to pronounce his surname, Bob Thiel, I think. He was one of the great jazz producers. He'd started the label Impulse before that. And I think he'd recorded Coltrane and many great people. And he produced the Gil records. So I think this is a very old fashioned thing, isn't it? Goes way back of
there's no separation between church
there's no
and state.
separation.
Yeah.
And when the separation started, that probably created a lot of problems that weren't there before, because it's like, oh, right, now this label's run by a lawyer who doesn't actually understand what making a record is. And I think there was an older generation of artists who, when they started encountering the modern way of doing a record label, were like, oh, so they're not making the records. What do they do?
This is what Mike Skinner famous in my life, said to me at a moment when I was feeling a little bit split between, like you were, between what I do and what I was probably put on this earth to do, which is kind of be way more about making music than talking with people about it. And he was like, yeah, but we need people.
Well, not necessarily. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. But he and this is what he was sort of getting at. He was like, yeah, but I know it eats you up inside sometimes. I can tell, because he's a very good judge of character. He said, but we need you to be able to speak our language in those rooms, because otherwise we're just facing just blank faces all the time, and people aren't listening.
Get in where you fit in.
Yeah, that's right. And it was a really lovely moment, and it kind of set me up to move forward in life, and I'm always grateful to him for that.
And there's a bit of Nietzsche, bring a bit of Nietzsche to Culver City this morning.
Nietzsche.
Maybe an American pronunciation. Nietzsche. Or Nietzsche.
Well,
However you want it.
You Brits really love to
America.
float that when you get it wrong, don't
And
you?
he
It's like,
said-
well, maybe in America it's
He
like that, isn't
said,
it?
amor fati, which means love your fate.
I'd like to zero in on this album and really give it some time. Because, by the way, I'm at a point in my life now where I'll sit down with an album in front of me, start a conversation, and if it's about Nietzsche and everything else but the album, most of the time, as long as the artist is happy to do it, I'm more than happy to do it. But this body of work requires some love and some thought. I would be upset if I didn't.
Let's go.
Let's go. So fast forward from the moment that you decided this is what you do now, and you've made some great records with other fantastic artists, and some everything is recorded albums too, which are brilliant. But this one just feels different to me. It just feels very different. It feels like an arrival of sorts. I know it's a strong statement. It reflects on your previous projects, but it just does. And I don't know how else to put it, but just be plain and frank with you. What does that statement mean to you as someone who's made it now, and you can sit back and, or at least with some altitude, take a listen to it? Does it feel like you went places that you've never been before, and you learned more about yourself than you ever did before? By some measure, by the way.
Yeah, I think it's the result of having learned a lot, fundamentally. And the last 10 to 15 years since I did that record with Gil Scott-Heron, this has really been like going to, this has been like education for me, further education of like being in the studio, in the room, and learning stuff. And it has been the kind of the experience of a lifetime, really, to like, because it's basically meant I've just felt deeper immersed into music, and I didn't realize I could have been, but I think that happened, and I started to actually understand music I already knew in a different way, because there'd been so much of it. Because to love music, you don't need to know anything about how it's being made. It's like tasting food. You don't need to know how it's made. You can just love it.
Yeah, it's all instinct work.
And so a chef's eating the food in a different way.
Yeah.
And in some ways that might make it less enjoyable.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was my, it was like something that was meant to be happening. Was I was meant to be going deeper in, working with artists in a ever more close-up way, and doing less at any one time, zeroing in on one record at a time. And I think part of that was also my naturally contrary nature, which is like, you start an independent record label, it becomes successful. What do people do? They make it bigger and do more stuff. I wanted to get smaller. I was like, and it wasn't a conscious thought, but I realized at a certain point, I'm just making my world as small as possible here by saying, I'm making this record now, and that's what I'm doing. And the person I'm making this record with will know and will feel
They have my full attention.
my total dedication to this, which is when I'm in the room, but it's also when you're working on these projects. It's when you go to sleep and when you wake up, and throughout these periods of record making, you can't work with Gil Scott-Heron, Damon All, but you can't work with people.
Be in a marketing meeting by 3 p.m. It's not a thing. Yeah.
But I should.
That's why I asked you, though.
No,
That's why I said, is this what you do now?
Yeah, but I should add that, like, how was that able to happen? Well, because the label had stopped being about me. Because if it's about you, you can't do that, right? And if you've made yourself the sort of epicenter of the egoic epicenter of everything, then it's like that will just be a prison. Ben Bearsworth was running the label by now, and he was better at doing that than I was. He's a very sort of stable character, and he's just someone who's able to listen and have tremendous consideration for all the people around him. And and was born to do it. And I had like a business partner in Martin Mills, who I've had for my whole life. I've had this. It's the ultimate blessing. I wasn't looking for a business partner when I was a teenager, but I got one, and he's been my partner for my whole life, and it's an unbelievable thing. I haven't had to worry about all the stuff that drives people nuts when they start these things.
The distractions,
and kind of ends these things.
Yeah,
It ends them, because like you start off as a music fan, and before you know it, you've got stuff to deal with. You don't know how to do that, but it's really important that it's done right. People have got to get paid. It's really important. It's as important as anything else. So I was so, the blessings were immense that like, okay, there's these people who have surrounded me, or have I surrounded myself with them? I don't feel like I consciously did that, but it's happened. And so, okay, I'm kind of saying to them, but I'm going to the studio now and I'm going to be there for like some time. And they're like, cool. Almost like I think they're happy.
Yeah, I think so too.
Because maybe it's like...
I think so too.
Right. Because like...
I get that feeling sometimes. I'm in meetings and I'm like, I'm not going to come to that meeting. That was like, we'll miss you. I'm like, will you really? I'm not sure you will.
Right. Because there's an intensity, right? There's an intensity.
Smiles in the room out there.
You bring that intensity to things. And that's part of everything, but it can also complicate things. So anyway, I'm able to like start focusing on being in the studio, being in the room. And with every record I make, I am learning. I'm learning about the person I'm working with. Being a record producer, it's multifaceted. You could be making a beat, but you could also be having to be someone's counselor. It's all
whatever serves the purpose.
Whatever. Yeah, exactly. It's all important. And I'm really, really trying to learn the equipment. I've got a desk, and I'm like, I never understood really how a desk works. They seem very complicated until you get used to it. And then, of course, it's not really complicated at all. It just takes a while to get to that kind of confidence. The engineers are incredibly important, but then there's a point where I'm like, let me try and do this in this proper room without an engineer for a bit and see how that works. Shit, I don't really know what I'm doing. But then you say that to the person you're working with, and they're like, I don't know what I'm doing
that's
either.
A beautiful observation for all creative people who are scared about the collaborative process. The amount of times I've been in writing sessions or production sessions with artists thinking, oh my God, this is the moment when I'm going to be caught out. I'm a fraud. This is where the imposter syndrome rears its head and I'm done. I'm cooked. And every time that I have to go, man, I need help on that, someone will be like, yes, same. Like, let's figure out a solution together. I don't know. And it's it's a very generous experience most of the time.
I think to like put it out there, your vulnerability, and where you're not confident and where you don't know if you have the skill or not. That's where you're really working together with people. Because also, especially if you're working with someone who's like performing vocals, they're on the line. They're just wide open, totally vulnerable. So I think, that you're at sea with like the outboard and like...
But equally on this album, you have gravitated towards, it feels to me more like this album, and I'm not trying to create like a comparison here, but on this album in particular, you are working with amazing performers and creative people, but you also have brought in people who perform and produce. Sampha produces, Jack produces, Kamasi produces. It feels very collaborative, like from a sort of overarching kind of everyone's serving the purpose.
Well, I really wanted to get out of my own way. That was one of the phrases. I wanted to just there was something there that was meant to be materializing, and it was like, get out of the way. And part of it is like a randomization also of like, so saying to Bill Callahan, who would you like to write a song for, rather than working that out don't
tell that
calculate.
Story, because I know that story very well because it was happening in real time when we had a brief hangout in Los Angeles. But people don't know that story. Bill Callahan, somebody who, I'm not even going to try to describe him, makes music as Smog as well as himself, and is just one of these iconic voices and writers of our time. A beautiful idea to work with Bill Callahan. I think we can get a bit granular on this, because it's so unique. How it came about and how it ended up being one of the two collaborations in particular, being with someone who I have a lot of respect for, Noah Cyrus.
So Bill wrote the song I'm New Here. I'd suggested to Gil Scott-Heron, we covered the song I'm New Here. That became the title track of the album I made with Gil. I'd had a little bit of sporadic contact with Bill over the years. And then for this project, I thought, with the themes here, because he's extremely profound. There's a profundity in his lyric writing. I thought he could really contribute something to this theme of temporary. So I got in touch with him and I said, is there anyone you would like to write a song for? And he said, I would like to write a song for Noah Cyrus because I'd love to get this phrase that he emailed me exactly right. But he said something like, she has a classic eye and an open heart. It was something like that. So,
You know how I feel.
yeah, I thought,
I think she's amazing.
I thought, I better go and listen to an Osiris album. I did. I was like, wow, what an awesome idea this is. Managed to get in touch with her and she was like, I love Bill Callahan. I love Bill Callahan. This is, yeah, in. So I come to LA. Bill hasn't delivered the song. I've got the session booked with Noah. But I spoke with Bill about this recently. He was like, you didn't give me long to write that song. And I was thinking, didn't I? I thought I did, but I don't. He said you gave me less than a week. I did. I don't know. I thought it was ages, but maybe not.
That is a long time.
The timing. Who knows? Everyone's recollection of it is different. But somehow, by the
way, that's the label owner coming out and you don't realize it. Like, oh mate, it's happening in 4 days.
By the time the session's happening, he had delivered the song and he'd sent us a recording of him singing Porcupine Tattoo. Played it to Noah. She was very, very moved by it because he'd written it for her. And it was these beautiful lyrics and it was for her. But she said...
Oh, beautiful. What a moment.
She said, what was insane was how she learned it because she learned it on the spot.
That family is not short on talent.
Wow. But she then said, you're into sampling, right? Why don't we use some of this demo that Bill's done? And I was just starting to think, but the tuning and stuff. She said, pitch it down. I said, well, chopped and screwed Bill Callahan. Now we're talking. Her suggestion, no suggestion, 100. So we did it, and it was perfect. And now we've got this duet. And Bill he's intended it as a demo in the old-fashioned sense of a demo, a demonstration of a recording for someone else to sing. But I was sort of thinking, he's an open dude, though. He's like wide open and there's no ego. So you can imagine he might be open to this.
Plus, you can imagine how Noah's feeling. Noah's feeling, okay, this is one thing to get a song from Bill Callahan. That's beautiful. But wouldn't it be great if it was a duet?
And then she cuts the vocal. It was, those moments. In a way, you work a lifetime for those moments, for like when something like that happens. And then she said, you ever use slide guitar on your records? I said, never. And she said, would you like to try that on this? And I was like, yeah, that would be great. Do you know a slide guitarist? I said, I don't. Would you like me to get my guy? I said, that'd be great. And there he was within the hour.
Yeah, Los Angeles.
Amazing. It was beautiful. He played it. I said, this would sound good backwards. He said, I've never heard my slide guitar backwards. We flip it backwards. Perfect. There. Done. Record done. Took it home and mixed it very, very gently. And it was done. And then I said to Bill, would you like to write another song? And he said, who's going to sing this one? And I was like, you? And he was like, all right.
And you went,
and then
you've got 24 hours, mate.
He sent me Norm. He sent me just the whole vocal for Norm, which as soon as I'd heard very little to go on, but I knew it was about Norm Macdonald. I knew that's what it was about because that's Norm Macdonald is so Bill.
Yeah.
And so, this incredible tribute song to this like beloved genius comic and an opportunity to sample Norm's voice and to get some of that. Because the humor is so important to everything. The humor is like the sanity, just in life generally for me.
One of the first examples of that in recorded music that I experienced was a band that I love, and the others that love this band know why I know what I'm talking about. This band Tool, who are just a cut above everybody else on every level. Genreless, really. More of a spiritual experience. And they sampled a lot of Bill Hicks on their Breakout album. And it was just a through line in this record at times that Bill Hicks would show up. And that was my first experience that something so heavy and so spiritually open knew itself so well that that the humor was an essential part of that learning. That it wasn't a relief, it was actually baked into the experience.
And the humor that we were all used to in hip hop, right? There was so much funny stuff.
So many punchlines.
So much funny stuff going on. And then if you go back to like the British American thing, there's a theory that the reason that the Beatles caught on here in the way it did is that when they showed up here, they were so funny. And they were doing these press conferences and they were like making fun of each other. And that was at a time when the presentation of showbiz singers was actually quite serious.
Yeah, it was. It was like suited and booted. Let's do this thing.
Right, exactly. And there were these guys, and it was all open, and it was funny, and it was fun. So the humor is like, it's a big thing.
Well,
Fife Dog,
very funny.
I like my beats hard.
Like 2-day-old.
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
and
of course the
what
famous
a metaphor.
Siemens furniture metaphor.
Siemens furniture. I mean, that I think the humor in records is, and
even when's the last time you heard a Funky Diabetic? One of my favorite Fife Dog lines. I mean, very deep and emotional, considering obviously how sad he is sadly no longer with us. So ultimately, where that line leads to. But at the time, way to embrace it and make us want to yell it back at you and celebrate it.
Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah, shout out to Caius Pawson. Funky Diabetic.
Oh, okay. I mean, we try not to give.
He has to. I mean, that's a hard thing.
Enough love on my show, man.
That's a
we
hard
have to
thing.
really shout him out again.
Yeah, come on.
All right.
He handles that.
Shout out,
He
guys.
handles that well. But the humor, and I think the humor I found in music making, Prodigy, a lot of humor, some really funny things going on in those.
Even that. Oh my God, that's so funky. I mean, it's hilarious.
And I think the humor for me, maybe because I wasn't quite relaxed enough with the music making, I sort of think it wasn't really making its way in all the time with what I've been doing.
It's pretty serious.
Quite serious.
You were making pretty serious.
Now, when I was making the bouncer, that wasn't serious. That was funny.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And, a lot of the time, what you find is artists whose work is really serious. They're funny. When you get to them, they're really funny. The energy is light and they're funny, especially when the work is serious. I think something that's happened with this record, whilst dealing with this, what could be extremely heavy theme, is a lot of humor has just kind of like crept into it. And I know that whilst the theme is serious, the making of this record was unbelievably enjoyable.
It must have been, because it took you 5 years.
It took a long time.
Sounds like you didn't want to stop.
It took a long time, and
I mean that genuinely too. Why would you stop if you're having fun? That's
the thing, isn't it? But you've got to. I've given people the feedback so many times that it's really good for you to finish something.
Oh yeah,
it's good for you. It's good. It's good for you as a person.
Struggle with it. I never had a problem with it. God, I find it tough at this point in my life.
Okay, so it's good to finish something, and a master of this art, Damon Albarn.
Yeah. Move on.
He said the reason you have to finish stuff, and he's really bringing this back to a kind of type of gratitude. He was like, doing this work is so fun. He loves music making, right? Making records is so fun. And when you finish one, you get to start another one. And actually, the starting bit is so fun because the finishing bit can be really tough. So it's like, all right, we'll get through it then. Get it done. And then you get to start another one with all of the freshness.
Which is, by the way, can I say, is just such a beautiful way to live for Damon Albarn and the people who he started another one with. But there's a fucking support group for the people who left behind on the last one who want to make another one. Which is a beautiful part of it. But you know what I mean? Like his restless soul is just so beautiful. But then you got to wait 8 years for him to come back and be like, all right, let's do another one of those ones.
Wow. But I think but what he has mastered is like making work with depth, not getting bogged down in it. And not getting too, because it's gonna come out. And I spoke to him once about whether something was like performing or not, and whether people were hearing it. And he was like, "That's a mug's game. Think about it in 10 years."
Love that.
Look at how this is for any artist. It's like, look at how your record performed in 10 years.
Yeah.
Because then you'll know.
Yeah, then
you'll actually know. It's too soon. Just after you've made it, the week it comes out, when people are looking at.
And by the way, you shouldn't have to focus on that because you're on to the next one. So just let it do its thing. Let it live. Let it breathe.
Yeah, and keep making stuff and keep the tap on.
There's a song. There's so many moments on this record that just require this real immersive experience. But I really do love "Never Felt Better." Sanford Florence, the way it's such a generous way she introduces herself because she's got such a power to her voice that she comes in a supporting role and then reveals herself as a key cast member in this song. But I'm used to Florence coming in and being so absolutely ready from the get-go. And it's so generous the way she ushers in around the music. Just a story about making that song, because I love that song.
Well, I think what you've identified there is maybe I don't want to speak for any of my collaborators, but I got the feeling they were really enjoying participating in this project. And maybe that's because they've all got their own careers. And your career comes with pressure and stuff, and you've got to think about everything. And in a situation like this, you don't have to, because I've got to think about it. So you get to come in the room and do it. And Florence was so free. I went to see her at the O2. My daughter Jade is a big fan, and I was like, it was unbelievable. I mean, it was unbelievable. The community around it, the fans.
Yeah, she's like no one else on this.
Messianic performance. And Jack Peñate, who's worked closely with me on the record, and Jack has become this. Jack's gone from being a artist at the front of the stage, which he's still very good at and good at doing, to being this incredibly generous and in demand studio guy.
His ear is unbelievable, from the work he does with you to his work with Flow, and it's just incredible what he brings.
Yeah. It's anyway, he went to primary school with Florence. They're like,
and everybody else.
And I mentioned it to him.
Yeah.
I mentioned it to him, and he was like, "Oh yeah, she'd love this. She'd love this." Because I was a bit like, "Well, it's a bit, it's O2s, it's arenas. It's like she's obviously like she's busy." He's like, "She'd love this." And she came in, and there was just like this openness to it, and it was so easy to do these songs. There's another song with Florence and Sanford, which is not part of the main body of work. It's a very different feel, so hopefully we'll get that one out after the record. Also very special though, called Wear and Tear. It's a beautiful song. So yeah, I think like she enjoyed the context, the process. She didn't overthink anything. Her notes were like, it's great.
Shooting from the hip.
I mean, just great.
Just knows herself. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Everybody on this record, for better or for worse, day by day, knows who they are. And that's why when I listen to this album, Richard, I feel like I know everybody at this moment in time, because there's no pretending going on here. And if there is, which is a big part of creativity too, it's self-aware. And that's the thing that I really love about listening to this record. Man, we've knocked out 75 minutes like it was 3 minutes straight, for me at least. I often say that in interviews, and then some people don't respond. And I think, oh, it's a bit more drawn out for you, was it? Fair enough.
No, I think you make this process enjoyable for the people you're talking to, because you're a listener, and you're listening to what people do, and it's appreciated.
Man, we're going to just live in this moment right here, whatever it becomes, whatever life it takes on, and whatever life there is to be lived. We will cross paths then, no doubt, because this lives beyond the studio, this relationship. But man, we're going to live in this moment in age-old radio fashion. We've forgotten some of the classic beats, so I'm going to bring a good one back. You should listen to this album. This album is waiting for you. By the time you hear this interview, it will be ready and be ready to be heard. And you should listen to this album. Embrace music, make it an active part of your life, not just something you hear in passing or at somebody else's behest. Embrace this album, because not for Richard, he's doing fine. Do it for yourself.